Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I've Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio. So, I am so excited about this one. I am so excited because probably a lot of you experience the same thing. We've talked about it. Every year we talk about it. But for us, like when the holidays come, it means like a sprint to the end with getting ahead with work so you can, quote, take time off. And you really want to anticipate it. So I think it was like October we were talking about this.
Well, we were talking about the fact that we've been talking about witches so much. And we were like, oh, it's going to be sad. We're not going to talk about witches anymore. But
then you had the idea, you're like, I wonder if there's a Christmas witch.
I knew there had to be.
Yes, and you were correct. You were correct. There are multiple Christmas witches, some of which are kind of like nice and commercial, because we found a book as well called The Christmas Witch, which is not what we were looking for. But maybe we'll look into one day. No, we were talking about like a Christmas witch.
Like we're talking Grimm's fairy tale level.
Mm-hmm. And so we've had this outline since then for months. And yeah, today we are talking about Grýla, the Christmas witch. I will say, I looked up the pronunciation, but it was from a UK video, and this is an Icelandic witch. So hopefully Grýla is correct, but if not, please let us know. And yeah, this one's going to be a bit shorter. Because again, holidays, we got a lot going on. Not too much is written about Grýla, sadly enough. Although I did get a personal anecdote last night. I can't wait to share it. Yes. Oh, it's so cool. But yeah. If you have any details we missed, any Christmas witches we should shout out, please let us know. And yeah, if you listen to this and you're like, you know what, this is my thing, I want more. We have done so many episodes on witches, as you said. We have done so many episodes on witches. We've done episodes on monsters. We've done episodes on why women love monsters. I would say our discussion of Baba Yaga is particularly relevant to this conversation. Baba Yaga came up in a lot of articles about Grýla. So go check that one out if you'd like. That was a good one. That was a fun one too. Yes, and this is definitely much more our lane when it comes to the holidays of let's make it a twist. Let's make a twist. Everyone else is doing this. Let's go for the Halloweenish version of what we can do.
Why not?
Yes, and it is super fun. So yeah, if you're looking at the darker side of Christmas stories and legends, which there are quite a few, one that has gained a lot of cultural traction here in the U.S., including parades and a whole movie. I've seen a play about him, is Krampus, the hoofed, horned German figure. But you really don't hear so much about Grýla, the Christmas ogress and witch from Icelandic legend, although she did recently pop up in something, which we will talk about. Yes. And kind of a shortened thing, because we have talked about witches a lot, but Christmas witches have roots in pagan history to deities and spirits that were thought to be women from those festivals around this time, especially like harvest festivals or like cool, winter's coming, that kind of thing. I actually did find a Game of Thrones and Grýla connection. It was a whole article. I didn't make it. But anyway. And many of these Christmas witches do have connections to the cold and deadly dark weather of winter. And Grýla is definitely in that realm. And she evolved from these beliefs.
I wonder if it's related to the Lion and the Witch of the Wardrobe with the White Witch.
Yes, I bet it absolutely is.
Because she's the one that keeps winter there.
Exactly.
Thoughts. So let's break down Grýla's history. The legend of Grýla dates back to the 13th century Iceland. And she is not one to be trifled with. She lives in a cold, dark cave in the hinterlands and is the mother of monsters and the eater of naughty children. Yes, she snatches them up and cooks them into a delicious stew. Of course, her name loosely translates to growler. That makes sense.
Yeah. Like you'd hear this like growling sound as she comes. Ooh, yeah.
There you
go. Stories of Grýla started as mostly oral, and the first written accounts started showing up in the 13th century. So that's kind of why this is when we know the story for sure, but was probably around long before that. Take this poem from the time. Here comes Grýla down in the field with 15 tails on her. Another poem reads, down comes Grýla from the outer fields with 40 tails, a bag on her back, a sword, knife in her hand, coming to carve out the stomachs of children who cry for meat during Lent. Big no-no. Other poems mentioned her and her husband, who she later ate because she was bored. You know?
You gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, she had multiple husbands. One historian described her as the first feminist in Iceland, which really cracked me up. I don't think it was related to the eating of the husband or multiple husbands
Okay,
thing.
I'm like, is this like the conservative definition of feminist? They're gonna eat men.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well,
maybe if I get bored
make
enough.
me bored. Yeah. But yeah, so never fear, because Grýla did get a second husband who was this troll-like figure who has a name, but I did not put it in here because I knew I would butcher the pronunciation. But
okay.
yes, he's also kind of a figure in this because the story of Grýla is also the story of her whole interesting family.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, including a huge man-eating Yule cat.
What's Yule cat?
It's like just a cat that comes out around this time.
Okay, so
Yeah,
not a breed.
I've seen illustrations of it, and it's like a big black cat. I've seen some of the descriptions make it sound much more kind of like Cerberus, like glowing red eyes kind of thing.
Yeah.
Others are kind of like it's just a big black cat. So I don't know. But this cat purposefully targeted those, especially kids, but anybody really, who wasn't wearing any new clothes. It could be like a sock. It could be underwear. But if you weren't wearing any new clothes during this time, you were in trouble. Because so all of this, they come out, it's supposed to be as winter's coming, it's getting darker and colder. This is when they start, checking in on what you're doing.
Right.
You need new clothes. It's getting cold.
I think that Yule cat is classist. I don't like it. How dare you? What if we can't afford those new clothes? Rude.
To round out the family, she had 13 adult sons called the 13 Yule lads. Each of these huge dudes has their own reputation of mayhem during December, including sausage swiping, door slamming, and leftover eating. We're going to go into them more a bit later, but just, okay, this is her family. This is what she's got going on. Although they weren't related at first. They kind of got... pushed together over time. But at first they were kind of separate legends, and then they all got mashed up together.
One horrible family. So this gets a bit complicated in terms of how modern day Christmas has transformed over time. But in Iceland at the time, there was a midwinter holiday related to English and Germanic Yule that involved a lot of gathering, feasting, celebrating, all the things that many of us associate with holidays. However, because of Iceland's geographic location, during this time of year, it's generally darker for longer. And yes, I have a TikTok account that lives in Iceland I watch, compared to somewhere like the US, for instance. And these early celebrations were not only an opportunity to connect with the living and the dead, but also with creatures like trolls, elves, and other things in that realm that were believed to inhabit the area. It was believed that sometimes these creatures wore flesh faces to visit houses and farms. Yeah, you'll never notice. You'll never recognize that.
So freaky, like, hello. My face
yes,
is
I
totally
am human.
normal. So one of these creatures in this realm was Grýla, who, we're going to get into this more in a second, but a lot of different descriptions of Grýla generally has a horned tail, at least one horned tail, and a bag that she would throw at children, specifically ones that she deemed to be naughty. She wasn't necessarily associated with Christmas, as I said, but more the place, the cold mountains, the danger that the season came with in terms of weather, the darkness and snow engulfing the land. She was the one who had the power over this land and those living there, especially during winter. People were at her whim and mercy, or the lack thereof.
Her physical descriptions have varied over the years from more ogre-like to more old witch-like. Here's a quote from Mental Floss. Grýla might look like, though like all Icelandic trolls, she's a gross, massive giant. One rhyme says she has 15 tails, each of which holds 100 bags with 20 children in each bag, doomed to be a feast for the troll's family. Another says she has 40 tails, and still another says she carries a bag of children on her thighs. All right. Some poems say she has 300 heads, each of which has 3 eyes. Other describes eyes in the back of her head, ears that hang so long that they hit her in the nose, a matted beard, blackened teeth, and hooves. All these stories agree on one point. She's very, very ugly. You ugly.
Oh,
not you.
Oh,
Grýla.
well, okay. Yeah, and there has been, surprise, not to me, but to many probably, some scholarly debate about why most of these witches are ugly. Some we've discussed before, like links to perceived wildness of paganism, or just, spinsters, old woman spinster, must be ugly. Others speculate it's almost an end of the year thing, more symbolic. So like, because she's a winter witch, the end of the year's coming, like maybe at the beginning of the year, it's like she's a baby. By the end, she's like this. I don't know. And others say that instead of summoning or causing bad weather, the witch is scared away. Like maybe, so this is encompassing more than just Grýla, but like their ugliness. I feel terrible saying that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Grýla. But their appearance is part of scaring the weather away, that they're actually not bringing it.
That's the greater good.
That's some interpretations of it. Others are just like, they're just kind of like a part of the land, and you have to respect the land and the danger of the winter. Like there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on here. It wasn't until the 19th century that people started to associate Grýla with Christmas specifically. It was also the same time that the menacing Yule Cat and 13 Yule Lads were more clearly linked to her becoming like this big dark family. And by the way, the stories of the Yule Lads got so bad, parents were banned from telling them to their kids in Iceland in 1746.
Man, we need those stories.
Well, and we've talked about this before, because the function of a lot of these is to get your children to behave.
Right.
But it sounds like it got kind of out of hand with the scaring of the children part.
I mean, it kind of makes sense. Again, like they went from Krampus and Grýla to Santa Claus. So like, we're going to reinforce instead of deter.
Yes. And I would love for listeners to write in. But I did find a couple of fascinating essays about how legends like this or stories like this, especially in Iceland or more generally Europe, perhaps, but specifically Iceland, like are just so important to how I like they're taken more seriously than they are here, I guess.
Right.
Like they are kind of respected, and people hear them and still hear them, and like it's almost a matter of respecting this darkness and this winter and this environment of Iceland. It was interesting. Very interesting. And as you're saying, Samantha, the 20th century saw American depictions of Santa Claus spreading throughout Europe. And that did impact how the Yule Lads were drawn, much more Santa-y, bigger bellies, red, whiskers. Instead of taking stuff and causing mayhem, they started leaving gifts. And Grýla was threatened with eternal extinction by those who wanted the winter holidays to be more family-friendly, with one song going into detail about their death. Like, they actually tried to kill her off.
What?
Yeah,
oh, damn.
Like, we want this to be a time of happiness.
R.I.P.
Yes. And this trend didn't really reverse until recently in Iceland. An effort by the National Museum of Iceland has been pushing to restore the Yule lads to their pre-Santa selves. And I want to go over their names now and what they do because I love it. And this is from the museum. So there's Sheep Coat Clod. He tries to suckle ewes in farmers' sheep sheds. Gollygawk, he steals foams from buckets of cow milk. Stubby, he's short and steals food from frying pans. Spoon licker, he licks spoons.
Would you call me?
Pot scraper, aka pot licker, he steals unwashed pots and licks them clean. Bowl licker, he steals bowls of food from under the bed. Back in the old days, Icelanders used to sometimes store bowls of food there. Convenient for midnight snacking, perhaps. Door slammer, he stops around and slams doors, keeping everyone awake. Skyr gobbler, he eats up all the Icelandic yogurt. Skyr, I think that's how you pronounce it. Sausage swiper, he loves stolen sausages. Window peeper, he likes to creep outside windows and sometimes steal the stuff he sees inside. Door sniffer, he has a huge nose and an insatiable appetite for stolen baked goods.
Okay.
Meat hook, he snatches up any meat left out, especially smoked lamb. Candle beggar, he steals candles, which used to be sought after items in Iceland.
I like these are very specific. And
right?
Somewhat, yeah. They are all really gross, barely.
Yeah.
Licking. Why do they have to lick so many things? That's unnecessary.
I know. Well, it's funny too to me, again, going back to that point of it sounds like it's just trying to get you to like clean up after yourself.
Right. like wash your bowls.
Right. Or else.
Wash your spoons.
Yes.
And apparently, close the door.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that one's kind of, that's like plug in your keyhole, I guess. I don't know. I got a very big kick out of this. I've never heard of it. But as I mentioned at the top, I was telling people that I was doing this research a couple of days ago, and somebody was like, oh, no, I know Grýla. I've heard of Grýla because I went to Iceland to visit a friend. And this is his story. He says when he got there, he saw a statue of her in the airport and was like, whoa. If you haven't seen a statue of her, whoa. She's intense. And was kind of taken aback that he saw the statue in the airport. But then one of these Yule lads, somebody dressed as one of these Yule lads, kept opening and closing the door to his taxi. And he didn't know what was going on because he's an American. He's never heard of this.
So wait, was it a real person doing this to him?
Yes.
Okay.
It was. Yes.
I was like, what? Okay.
But he knew all about it because he said he had to ask his friend, like, what was that? And his friend told him about.
Yeah. That would be alarming because you're like, are you trying to kidnap me?
Right.
I've seen Taken. No, sir.
No, sir, I say. And this is where I want you listeners to write in. Apparently, kids are still terrified of her. They still are freaked out by Grýla. There are depictions of her across Iceland to remind folks about Grýla. And she and her sons were recently featured in The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina on Netflix, where she was a witch that protected mistreated children instead of turning them into stew.
Huh.
Yeah. So there's definitely been kind of an embracing of this creepier, more historical version of Grýla and her whole family.
And her whole family.
Yes.
Looking at the pictures, she is gruesome. But apparently there's some really fun ornaments. I want one.
I know. A Grýla ornament would be amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I do. I want one too. And I think if we hear from listeners, I think we do a follow-up on Grýla because I feel like there's got to be more about her. But that's about what we could find. Most of this came from one really helpful article, deep dive from the Smithsonian. If you want to read more, it's amazing. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot more academic stuff about like witches and winter witches in general that was not exactly what we were looking for our easy kind of winter episode, but fascinating, and we could return to at a later date. We did want to go through a couple more examples quickly because Grýla is not the only Christmas witch in town, as we said. And we've got a few honorable mentions that when I read about it, I was like, oh no, I have to at least mention this.
So there's an Austrian and Bavarian one, Frau Perchta, who around Christmas time checks in to see which kids have been naughty or nice. The naughty ones get their torsos split open and stuffed with straw, obviously.
Obviously. There's a lot of interesting ones about Frau Perchta. Nobody's safe from her. But that was the one where I was like, whoa, we really went like from 0 to 100 quickly.
They were ready.
Mm-hmm. And the parents are supposed to find the body the next day. That's so gruesome.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Split open, stuffed with straw.
Yep.
What happens to the good kids?
Nothing.
Well, that's some BS.
You don't get cut open and stuffed with straw, I guess.
Yes, you're right. But at the same time.
Then there's Italy's La Befana. La Befana is descended from pagan witches, and based on the story, can ride a goat or a broom or both, maybe. And it's typically very crone-like in appearance. Generally, good kids are safe from La Befana, and may even get some candy from her. Bad kids, however, might get coal. Some versions have candy shaped like coal, which I guess is fine. But they could also get scooped up and taken to her home to be fed to her cannibalistic husband, which seems to be a theme. Just like Grýla, there have been some attempts to sanitize and Christianize her story, with one going so far as to claim that the 3 wise men stayed with her on their way to see baby Jesus. And when the men invite her to join them, she declines. She says she's busy, and in some versions is grieving the loss of her own child, and doesn't want to go. And then in some versions thinks that Jesus is her own child.
What? Huh. That went very far.
Yes, I know. Yes, I know. She changes her mind and goes and brings Jesus a gift, and he loves it so much. He makes her the protector of Italian children. In some depictions of her, she even sweeps the floor of all the homes she visits, which is very nice. She is so beloved in Italy. There are multiple festivals and markets held in her name, and apparently one in Italy involves a boat race with people dressed up as witches.
So, yeah, I guess the celebrations now are of her being a witch, not so much the saint, or is it the saint version?
I think there's both, but
Okay.
I think she started out as a much less nice witch and evolved into a nicer witch, but I think she's still a witch.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
She can still hold on to that claim.
Yes, that was my understanding. But again, listeners write in because it seems she's still quite popular.
Yeah, she's relevant.
Yeah, festivals.
We need to go.
I know. Yes, let's take a trip. It's time. And then there were a couple more. I did want to mention this. There wasn't enough to do a whole mention of them without going into. I think this would be a separate episode, but I did want to say there were a couple of other Christmas witches that actually were more about harassing women than children, like a housewife who's not doing her job as well as she should be. Some of it involved leaving smudges of feces on laundry, messing up housework, and sometimes splitting them open and stuffing them with straw, which I just found fascinating because, as we said, they're so moralistic, naughty or nice, do your chores or else, that I find it interesting that there are some versions of them that are specifically towards women and housewives from this time. So just a note that I had when I was doing this research, okay.
Interesting.
Yep, very interesting. I mean, honestly, the research was very fun. This was a fun one to research. So if you listeners, again, you have any follow-ups, any more details, any suggestions, any legends
Other
like this.
witches, yes.
Other witches. There are also some really cool women in food and witches traditions that I found. So if you know about those, please let us know. Yes, and you can contact us in many ways. You can email us at stephaniamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on Instagram at Stuff Mom Never Told You. Thanks as always to our super producer, Christina.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff Mom Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.